philosophy, and values with pride and spirit. Though it may seem simple, this uniform holds your passion and your journey. It belongs to Taekwondo. Wear the extraordinary. Be with Taekwondo.
President Lee Jae-myung laid out South Korea's new initiative to strengthen collaboration with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and called for a tighter cooperation under the ASEAN +3 framework on transnational crimes. And the leaders of South Korea and Cambodia agreed to launch a joint task force to track down online scam crimes targeting South Koreans, following a recent string of such crimes there. South Korea's benchmark KOSPI breached the 4,000 mark for the first time in history on Monday, over investors' growing optimism of a possible U.S.-China trade deal and expectations of a rate cut by the U.S. Federal Reserve. President Lee Jae-myung is on his way back to South Korea after wrapping up a two-day trip to Malaysia to attend his first ASEAN summit. There, the president outlined how his administration plans to further strengthen South Korea's partnership with the bloc. Our President Office correspondent Seung-jae reports from Kuala Lumpur.
A contributor, a springboard, and a partner, or CSP for short. That's the vision President Lee Jae-myung has laid out for South Korea and ASEAN's Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, also CSP, the bloc's highest level of partnership established with Seoul last year.
저는 한 아세안 관계가 이웃 사촌과 같다고 생각합니다. 아세안과 한국은 금융위기와 팬데믹, 자연재해 등이 닥칠 때마다 힘을 모아 위기를 극복해온 자랑스러운 경험이 있습니다.
The pillars of the vision unveiled by the president himself at the South Korea ASEAN summit on Monday are expanding people-to-people exchanges, upgrading the free trade agreement to boost exports, and strengthening joint responses to shared security threats. Lee particularly focused on transnational crimes such as online scams, an issue that has raised big concern back home following the death of a Korean college student believed to have been lured to Cambodia by a scam gang.
한국 경찰청은 아세안 폴가의 수사 공조를 통해 조직적 범죄 단지를 건절하고 초국가 범죄가 이 지역에서 더 이상 발붙일 곳이 없도록 협력을 강화해 나갈 것입니다.
According to presidential spokesperson Kang Yoo-jung, during the summit's closed-door session, President Lee outlined his administration's North Korea policy, emphasizing dialogue, normalization of inter-Korean relations, and denuclearization, which received strong support from participating leaders. On the same day, President Lee also made his debut at the ASEAN +3 summit, which brings together South Korea, Japan, and China, along with the ASEAN members. He stressed the need to work together to tackle what he called, quote, complex and multi-layered challenges.
인구 고령화, 저출산, 국가 간 세대 간, 계층 간 디지털 격차, 기후변화와 자연재해로 인한 식량 위기, 에너지 위기, 초국가 범죄 등 다양한 도전 과제들이 우리 모두의 일상에 큰 영향을 미치고 있습니다. 한중일 간 교류가 아세안 +3 협력으로 이어지고 아세안 +3에서의 협력이 한중일 간 교류를 견인하는 선순환을 위해 중국 그리고 일본과 긴밀하게 협력해 나가겠습니다.
The summit concluded with a joint statement on enhancing regional economic and financial cooperation. It's the beginning of a super week of multilateral diplomacy. Once he returns to South Korea, waiting for the president is the APEC economic leaders meeting in Gyeongju, as well as high-stakes summits with U.S. President Donald Trump and China's Xi Jinping. Seung-jae, Arirang News, Kuala Lumpur.
Staying in Malaysia, the leaders of South Korea and Cambodia met on the sidelines of the ASEAN-related diplomatic event. They agreed to establish a joint task force to investigate online scams in Cambodia targeting Koreans. Yoon Jung-min reports.
Tackling transnational online scam crimes topped the agenda when President Lee Jae-myung met Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet on the sidelines of the ASEAN-related summits in Kuala Lumpur, in the wake of a recent surge of such crimes in Cambodia, where some South Koreans have been found involved or fell victim.
대한민국에서는 현재 이 스캠 범죄 때문에 우리 국민들 전체가 매우 예민한 상태인데 우리 캄보디아 당국이 대한민국 국민들에 대해서 각별한 배려를 해주신 점 진심으로 감사드립니다.
The Cambodian leader began the summit by offering his condolences for the recent death of a Korean college student, believed to have been lured to Cambodia by a scam gang, and pledged for stronger crackdowns on such crimes with other nations.
This is not a single country issue, it's a regional issue. It's work in Cambodia and many other countries around that make it complex.
As a result of their meeting, they agreed to take further action.
The two leaders have agreed to launch a task force in November dedicated to investigating crimes in Cambodia targeting Koreans. The number of Korean police officers who will be dispatched and their operation will be confirmed as soon as possible.
In light of the launch, President Lee signaled that South Korea may lower its travel alerts for certain areas in Cambodia, including Phnom Penh. Other areas of focus were bolstering cooperation on a wide range of issues, as President Lee expressed hope of elevating bilateral cooperation to a new level, while Prime Minister Manet hoped to expand investment, people-to-people exchanges, as well as cooperation on security and defense. Before heading home, President Lee sat down with Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim on Monday, with a focus on future cooperation, including trade, AI, arms industries, and Korea's peace vision. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The nation's benchmark KOSPI has yet again broken records, something investors are getting used to by now. But today, it was the 4,000 mark, which is entering a new range. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
South Korea's benchmark KOSPI surpassed the 4,000 mark for the first time on Monday, driven by expectations of a U.S.-China trade deal and gains on Wall Street. The index opened strong, staying above 4,000 for the entire session and hitting a new intraday high of 4,042.83, where it closed. This year's rally marks a surge of around 68% from its closing point of 2,400.86 on January 2nd. The milestone also comes just over 4 months after the KOSPI returned to the 3,000-point range.
It appears there are expectations that the summit between President Trump and President Xi Jinping will yield positive results. Furthermore, continued optimism for the semiconductor industry, particularly the so-called supercycle, is driving foreign capital inflows and leading the domestic market's push past the 4,000 mark.
Samsung Electronics also made history as its share price broke 100,000 won since its last share split. This pushed its market capitalization to 597 trillion won, or about 417 billion US dollars. Samsung's shares closed at 102,000 won. SK Hynix also rose, with the market closing at 535,000, a gain of 4.9% compared to the last session's close. Together, the two chip giants account for approximately 32% of the KOSPI's entire market cap. The surge is attributed to a recovery in the semiconductor industry and resurgent competitiveness in high-bandwidth memory chips. Analysts note that significant supply increases from major memory producers, including Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, face fiscal constraints in the short term, with new supply possible only from the second half of 2026 at the earliest. Memory prices are expected to continue rising until the end of that year. Therefore, earnings estimates for Samsung and SK Hynix are likely to be revised upward, with the semiconductor sector's rally forecast to continue into 2026, outperforming the main index. 김도현, Arirang News.
Now, Monday saw a new milestone for South Korean shares after the U.S. and China produced a framework for a potential trade deal that will be discussed when their respective leaders meet later this week here in South Korea. Seung-jae has the details.
Top U.S. and Chinese economic officials have agreed on the framework of a new trade agreement, signaling progress ahead of a highly anticipated meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping later this week. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jameson Greer met with Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng and top negotiator Li Chenggang on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur on Sunday, marking the fifth round of in-person discussions since May. Speaking to ABC News on the same day, Bessent said the two sides averted further tariffs thanks to the maximum leverage provided by Trump.
The president had given me maximum leverage when he threatened 100% tariffs if the Chinese imposed their rare earth global export controls. So I think we have averted that so that the tariffs will be averted.
Bessent said a substantial framework was put in place for the two leaders, adding that China has agreed to delay its expanded licensing regime for rare earth exports by 1 year, a move seen as a concession to ease trade tensions. He also said that China has agreed on substantial agriculture purchases for U.S. farmers. Meanwhile, President Trump arrived in Malaysia on Sunday for the ASEAN summit, his first stop on a 5-day Asia tour that will culminate his face-to-face meeting with Xi in South Korea on Thursday. Both sides are hoping to defuse mounting trade tensions following months of tariff threats and countermeasures. The new framework, if finalized, could mark a turning point in the trade dispute, with officials emphasizing cooperation over confrontation as they prepare for the leaders' summit later this week. Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea has once again reaffirmed its commitment to work with the U.S. on their shared goal of denuclearization after President Donald Trump referred to North Korea as a sort of a nuclear power. Moon Jeong has this report.
Following U.S. President Donald Trump's remarks referring to North Korea as sort of a nuclear power, a South Korean presidential official said on Sunday that Trump appeared to recognize the advanced reality of North Korea's nuclear capabilities rather than officially recognizing its status or abandoning nuclearization goals. They also reaffirmed close coordination with the U.S. on denuclearization. Trump made the remarks during a press meeting aboard Air Force One on Friday in response to a question about Pyongyang's stance that recognition as a nuclear power is a prerequisite for talks with Washington. He departed for an Asia tour over the weekend, which includes a visit to South Korea, and expressed a strong desire to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, I do. I mean, if you want to put out the word, I'm open to it. You know, they don't have a lot of telephone service. They have a lot of nuclear weapons, but not a lot of telephone service. So I'm open to it. I had a great relationship with him, and he probably knows I'm coming, right?
However, prospects of a U.S.-North Korea meeting seem to have dimmed as North Korean Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee departed Pyongyang for a trip to Russia and Belarus. According to the North State media, the Korean Central News Agency on Monday, Choi's visit to the two countries is at the invitation of their foreign ministers. Her absence during the run-up to Trump's visit to South Korea suggests that talks between Kim and Trump are unlikely to materialize. 문지영, Arirang News.
Washington has appointed a new charge d'affaires to lead its embassy in South Korea. Kevin Kim, a Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. The U.S. Embassy in Seoul announced his appointment on Monday, saying that Kim will work with embassy staff and the Korean government to advance shared interests and strengthen the ironclad Korea-U.S. alliance. Kim played a role in all three of President Donald Trump's first-term meetings with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, held in Singapore, Hanoi, and the inter-Korean border area of Panmunjom. A Korean American, Kim has previously served on the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee and as a senior advisor to Senate Bill Hagerty before taking on senior roles at the State Department overseeing Korea, Japan, and Mongolia. Now, the U.S. ambassador to Seoul post has been now vacant for 10 months. World leaders are set to convene in South Korea, which is hosting the APEC forum this week. The week will be full of official discussions and sideline summitry, which will be a test for South Korea's diplomatic strength. Our Oh Seung tells us what to expect.
As host of the annual Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum this week, South Korea aims to bring together 21 economies representing 40% of the world's population and 60% of global GDP. Under the theme Building a Sustainable Tomorrow, the annual meeting will centre on three goals: strengthening regional connectivity, harnessing AI-driven growth, and advancing the transition to a more resilient and prosperous Asia-Pacific. Corporate heads of the region's largest firms from Samsung and SK to OpenAI and Nvidia will attend the CEO Summit on Thursday and Friday. And government leaders will convene on Friday and Saturday amid deepening geopolitical standoffs and the fragmentation of global trade.
So for APEC, which was built on the idea of open trade, this fragmentation really is a test. And for sustainability, global climate change or energy transition, those are not side issues anymore. Actually, they literally define competitiveness. So these APEC member states are under huge pressure to decarbonize, but still grow. So collaboration on green tech will be really the key during the APEC. And also, it's very important for our future generation.
But the question remains on whether South Korea can keep the focus on regional cooperation. Top-level meetings on the sidelines are expected to dominate headlines, with the leaders of South Korea, the United States, Japan and China all holding one-on-one talks. An unlikely but not impossible meeting of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and US President Donald Trump could also steal the limelight. However, the biggest spotlight will fall on the first US-China summit since President Trump's return to office, and on how their tariff and export controls may reshape the regional economy, in stark contrast to APEC's founding principle of free trade and open cooperation. Still, experts say South Korea could set the tone of the multilateral meeting.
Also, I think APEC could serve as some sort of de-risking platform, so that we can talk about how to separate our national security issues from commerce. For example, we can have some practical conversation with the major powers like the US or Japan on national security issues, while staying well connected, well engaged with China and ASEAN on trade. So reducing our security risk while keeping our markets open.
Through a series of high-level official meetings, Seoul has been working to produce the Gyeongju Declaration and a separate initiative on AI governance.
At the moment, South Korea is pushing for supply chain stability, especially in semiconductors, batteries, GPUs, and some critical minerals. And we need some practical plans for WTO consistent trade on digital products, as well as some sensible AI guardrails so that our businesses can invest with confidence. I think a very interesting opportunity for us to thread some needle so we can balance secure supply chain, greener growth, and maybe fewer friction for exporters. And if we managed to strengthen some trust among big players during APEC, that must be really a win.
Amid geopolitical theatrics, APEC Week will test South Korea's diplomatic prowess, its ability to draw consensus amid contention, and to keep dialogue alive among competing member economies. Oh Seung, Arirang News.
With APEC 2025 Korea just around the corner, Gyeongju is once again in the spotlight, this time for its royal treasures. A rare exhibition brings all 6 gold crowns back to Silla Kingdom for the first time. Our Park Hyo-bin has a story.
The host city of APEC 2025 Korea, Gyeongju, was once the center of the ancient Silla Kingdom known as the Land of Gold. Among its many gold treasures, the crown was the most important symbol of royal power and craftsmanship. So far, 6 Silla gold crowns have been discovered. And now, for the first time, all 6 are displayed together at the Gyeongju National Museum along with other royal ornaments to celebrate APEC 2025 Korea. The crowns, believed to have been made between the 5th and 6th centuries, have branches shaped like deer antlers symbolizing life and vitality. It is also believed that the king, as wearer of the crown, was a sacred being connected to the heavens. Silla's crowns are special because they make up more than half of all ancient gold crowns ever found in the world. No other kingdom has left behind so many golden relics in such good condition.
The Silla gold crown symbolizes the height of royal power and artistry, standing as one of the most exquisite ancient treasures in the world. Seeing all 6 together captures the true glory of the Land of Gold.
The museum also says the exhibition will help visitors discover the beauty and spirit of Silla art.
No kingdom other than Silla has left behind such unique cultural treasures as these gold crowns. We thought this would be the perfect theme to celebrate both APEC and the museum's 80th anniversary.
More than a showcase of artifacts, it's a journey through the artistry and legacy that defined ancient Silla. The exhibition runs until December 14th, drawing worldwide attention to the legacy of the Silla period. Park Hyo-bin, Arirang News, Gyeongju.
It's time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. For that, we have our sports editor, Paul Nietzsche, joining us in the studio. Welcome back, Paul.
Thank you. Hello.
Paul, why don't we start with football and South Korea's domestic football K-League. It looks like Incheon United are back in the top flight.
Yes, that's right. Incheon sealed the K-League 2 title on Sunday. It meant an instant return to the top division. It was sealed via a 3-0 win over Gyeongnam FC and a draw for Suwon Blue Wings the day before, meaning Incheon are 10 points clear with 9 points left to play for. Goals on Sunday came from Jerso Fernandez, Stefan Magosa and Mado Barrow. Another goal from Magosa puts him on 20 for the season, 4 clear of his nearest rivals for the Golden Boot. Incheon had become the relegation escape artist over the years, but finally succumbed last season. If Incheon win their last 3 games, they can set a new record for points in K-League 2, beating the 86 set by Gyeongju in 2022.
Still plenty to play for then. Now moving on to baseball, the MLB World Series has begun. Tell us more.
Yes, it has. The series is tied at 1-1 between the LA Dodgers and the Toronto Blue Jays. Game 1 saw the Blue Jays earn an 11-4 win at home on Friday, but LA fought back in Game 2 the following day with a 5-1 win. Game 3 is coming up on Monday night local time in LA. It is a best-of-7 series, but one that so far has yet to see South Korea's Kim Hye-sung appear. If Kim does play, he'll be the first South Korean to feature in a World Series since Choi Ji-man in 2020. Meanwhile, the KBO Korean Series has also begun. Sunday saw the LG Twins earn an 8-2 win over the Hanwha Eagles in Game 1. Game 2 got underway earlier tonight, and the score is currently 9-5 to LG. The Eagles are in a Korean series for the first time in 19 years, and their only win came back in 1999. The Twins last won in 2023 and have 3 titles overall.
Right. Paul, shifting back to football for a moment, Son Heung-min and LAFC are set to take part in the MLS Cup playoffs. Tell us more.
Right, so LAFC finished third in the Western Conference. Now, this earned a place in the first round of the playoffs, where they'll face Austin FC in a best-of-3 series. The first match is coming up on Wednesday local time, with the second on Sunday. Now, should LAFC win the series, they'll advance to the Western Conference semi-finals, played over a single match. After that, it is the conference final, again over a single match. Then the winners will meet for the MLS Cup. Son moved to LAFC in the summer and helped guide his new team up the table, scoring 9 and assisting 3 in just 10 matches.
Paul, finally to badminton, I do have to say, number 9 seems to be magic number for South Koreans at the French Open.
Right, yes, Kim Won-ho and Seung-jae made it 9 wins for the season for them. On Sunday, the pair beat Mohamed Shiobul Fikri and Fajar Ilfian 2-1. They actually lost the first match 21-10, but then won the second and third 21-13, 21-12. Before this, on Saturday, An Se-young made it 9 titles by also winning the French Open. The world number 1 beat her rival Wang Zhiyi 2-0, 21-13, 21-7. The match against the world number 2 lasted just 42 minutes. It's Anne's third French Open title, having also won in 2019 and 2024.
Great stuff as always, Paul. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
Even though it is still October, warm coats and scarves are necessary already. As the cold winds from the north came down, some areas fell to below 0 this morning and recorded the coldest morning this fall. With the first cold wave warnings of this fall being issued, it will start off cold tomorrow morning at 2 degrees Celsius in Seoul. This sudden cold will last until Wednesday. Please take care of your health. Tomorrow morning, most areas will start off at below 10 degrees, with Chuncheon at -2 degrees, Daegu at 3 degrees. However, temperatures will recover to double digits during the day tomorrow. Seoul will rise up to 12 degrees, Daejeon and Gyeongju at 14 degrees. Rain is forecast for the Seoul metropolitan area and western parts of Gangwon-do province on Friday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서 우리는 더 자유롭고 더 멀리 갈 수 있어.
닫힌 문이 아니라 열린 질문으로.
나에게 APEC은
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성, 포용,
개발.
신라의 정신이 APEC 2025로 이어집니다.
Lair the Peak.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. South Korea's diplomatic super week is officially underway. President Lee Jae-myung begins with his first ASEAN summit, where he's expected to meet U.S. President Donald Trump and Japan's new Prime Minister Seung-jae Takaichi for the first time. But ASEAN is just the opening act. As the APEC leaders meeting in Gyeongju approaches, all eyes are on tariff talks with the U.S., evolving security dynamics, Xi Jinping's upcoming visit, and the future of Korea's ties with Japan as well. So to help us break down the key issues, we are joined in the studio by Min Jung-hoon, professor at the Korean National Diplomatic Academy. A big welcome.
Good evening.
And also joining us online is Daniel Connolly, a associate professor of international relations at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Good to see you, Professor.
Thank you for inviting me.
So let's start a discussion with Professor Min. The so-called Super Week diplomacy has officially kicked off, stretching from the ASEAN summit to the upcoming APEC leaders meeting as well. So with high-level meetings with Washington and Beijing scheduled during this season, what do you see as top priorities for the Lee administration's diplomatic strategy?
Yes, as you know, Lee Jae-myung government is pursuing national interest-driven pragmatic diplomacy, and it is based on the robust ROK-US alliance. And Lee government has tried to further strengthen the alliance, and it also tried to enhance the trilateral cooperation with the US and Japan. So the Lee government will have a good opportunity to enhance personal trust and bond between the two leaders, South Korea and U.S., and confirm its close relations with the ally. And the President Lee will also have a first meeting with the new Japanese Prime Minister Seung-jae Takaichi at a summit meeting, and have an important momentum to build trust between the two leaders. And in addition, along with the further strengthening its relations with the U.S. and Japan, it's about time diplomatically for South Korea to expand the scope of its pragmatic diplomacy beyond the U.S. and Japan, and therefore it needed to manage favorable relations with other major diplomatic counterparts like China and ASEAN. And as you know, China and ASEAN countries have been the major diplomatic counterparts that South Korea needed to favorably manage its relations, because they are South Korea's important trading partners and play significant roles in the regional peace and stability. So, for example, China is an important trading partner of South Korea, and it can also exert significant influence over North Korean issues. So South Korea needed to manage its bilateral relationships with China in a stable and constructive manner. So facing the the diplomatic week, South Korea needed to solidify its relations with the U.S. and Japan, and also needed to expand the diplomatic scope and the level beyond the Korean Peninsula. This week will provide a very important momentum for South Korea's diplomatic movement.
Definitely. So agenda seems to be packed in across all fronts this week. But before that, let's start with the ASEAN, Professor. So this marks President Lee's first debut on the ASEAN stage. What's your take on the significance and the outcomes of his visit to Malaysia?
Yes, ASEAN is an important economic partner of South Korea. And as you know, it's one of the top three, the trading partner of South Korea. And the ASEAN member states are very young and vibrant. And they are also deeply interested in the K-culture, Hallyu, and they have positive perceptions on South Korea. So when we talk about diversifying the diplomacy and trade, number one alternative has been the ASEAN countries. So very important, the diplomatic counterparts for South Korea. And at the Korea's ASEAN summit this time, President Lee presented South Korea's initiatives to strengthen cooperation with ASEAN, and he also asked for support about South Korea's peace efforts on the Korean Peninsula. Specifically, President Lee laid out South Korea's new initiatives to bolster the comprehensive strategic partnership, CSP, made with ASEAN countries last year, and proposed hosting a special Korea-ASEAN summit in 2029 to recognize the 40th anniversary of the bilateral relations. Specifically, the CSP vision aims to position South Korea as a C contributor to support youth in Southeast Asia and as springboard for growth and innovation, and the P partner for peace and stability. And President Lee also shared his E&D initiatives with ASEAN member states, standing for exchange and normalization of relations and the denuclearization, which aims at easing tensions and improving inter-Korean relations. And he also asked for their support, ASEAN country support, about peace-building process on the peninsula. And on the sidelines, as you know, President Lee held a summit with the Cambodian Prime Minister to discuss the strategic relationships between the two countries and the pending issues, like the online scam crimes. And last but not least, President Lee also met the Malaysian Prime Minister to discuss ways to further bolster bilateral ties between the two countries. So overall, I think President Lee's participation in the ASEAN summit is providing good momentum for enhancing the cooperation between South Korea and ASEAN.
Definitely a very important opportunity for President Lee too. Now, let's also invite Professor Connolly to the conversation. So, given ASEAN's approach of maintaining balance and autonomy between major powers, especially as U.S.-China rivalry intensifies, what kind of diplomatic gains can South Korea actually expect from the deepening cooperation with ASEAN?
It's a really important question because I think it's not just a problem of Sino-US competition. It's also the fact that great powers are increasingly weaponizing their interdependence over smaller economies. South Korea experienced this with THAAD, with China, and is currently experiencing this with President Trump in the United States. So I think in this kind of era of double threats, ASEAN's whole philosophy of autonomy and balancing great power competition is something that all U.S. allies are suddenly finding very attractive. Canada, for example, is currently undertaking a major effort to diversify its trading relationships with other countries as a way of limiting the damages from U.S. tariffs, and it also is focusing on ASEAN. So I think if South Korea does something similar, by reaffirming and participating in this idea of ASEAN's centrality, Korea can really forge some diplomatic and economic relationships that are independent of the US alliance system, but that don't go directly against US interests. And I think this kind of very pragmatic relationship building can really strengthen South Korea's autonomy. Especially South Korea has a real competitive advantage. Because South Korea is not a great power, many ASEAN nations like Malaysia or Vietnam will feel much more comfortable making deals with South Korea, and they don't have this fear of interdependencies being weaponized like they might with the United States or China. And for example, last year's South Korea's exports to Vietnam, over $50 billion. US exports to Vietnam were only $13 billion. So I think South Korea has a real competitive advantage in the region as a trading partner and as a diplomatic partner going forward.
Right, and that efforts and balance is becoming even more crucial than ever. Now let's switch a little bit to the talks with Washington. So we are aware that working level discussions from both sides are not quite happening at the ASEAN because they're not attending. So it looks like there won't be much room for that there pre-summit. So given that, Professor Min, how likely do you think the tariff issue would be resolved through a top-down approach at Gyeongju?
Well, personally, I think that there's a possibility for the issue to be settled down at the summit, but generally speaking, it seems to be a little bit difficult to reach a final agreement on the trade negotiations between the two countries. As President Lee Jae-myung mentioned during his the media interview, South Korea and U.S. remained deadlocked on the details of $350 billion investment to the United States. Specifically, the two countries have got different opinions about how to carry out the investment package, like the method, amount, and timeline of the investment, and how to share the losses and divide the dividends. And President Lee also mentioned that but the discussion is still ongoing, and the delay doesn't necessarily mean that it's a kind of failure. And he also said that he believes that the countries will be able to reach a rational result sooner or later. And meanwhile, President Trump mentioned that the trade deal between the two countries is pretty close to being finalized, and he also said that he's ready. South Korea is ready. So just passing the ball on the Korean side. But anyway, as you mentioned, considering that another working level negotiation is unlikely to be held before the bilateral summit between the two countries on Wednesday, it is more likely that the two leaders will make the political decision at the summit. So that's the last the hope that the two countries will make the compromise about the trade negotiations, but we will see what will actually happen. But personally, I hope that the two leaders will reach a final agreement and create a win situation for both countries.
Right. Let's look forward to that in the coming days. Now, alongside this tariff negotiations, there's been some movement on the security front as well. But it's reported that the U.S. prepares a package deal that ties both security and trade. So, Professor Connolly, how likely is it that Washington might use security cooperation as leverage in this stalled trade negotiations?
I think there's a high chance of it. Even in Trump's first administration, he periodically complained about South Korea being a security free rider, getting defended for free, sort of language that he used quite often. Even during his second presidential campaign, he referred to South Korea as a money machine. So I think in Trump's view, security and trade are part of the same way that South Korea is taking advantage of a benevolent United States. Whether or not this is true, I think both sides have very different opinions. But I think moving forward, South Korea may have some opportunities in the security field. The Lee administration is broadly supportive, I think, of the ROK being more self-reliant. Being more self-reliant in the security arena can give South Korea more long-term independence from similar US pressures. And I think if South Korea can shift from being a purely security consumer, South Korea's defense industries, they're growing, the exports in Europe, also in Southeast Asia, might be indicating that South Korea can become a security provider in the region, at least at the level of defense industries. Also, South Korea's shipbuilding industry is something that the US doesn't have. And I think South Korea could give some of these sort of things on the plate to sweeten the deal and maybe get some compromises in terms of the $350 investments that they promised to the United States. So Trump is most likely going to include security, but it could benefit South Korea in some ways.
Right, if we use it in a transactional manner, you're saying, right? Mm-hmm. Now, let's also shift to China-Korea relations, Professor Min. So, President Xi Jinping is expected to make a state visit to South Korea in more than a decade, and the summit is expected soon. What kind of discussions do you expect to take place between the two?
Well, personally, I think that President Xi Jinping's state visit to South Korea for the first time in 11 years. 11 years will lay the foundation for restoring South Korea-China relations. As I mentioned, the Lee government is pursuing expanding the scope of its pragmatic diplomacy by managing favorably relations with other major diplomatic counterparts like China. And again, China is a very important neighborhood for South Korea in terms of economy and geopolitics. And China also want to restore and enhance its relations with South Korea. As the U.S.-China strategic competition has been intensified, China needed to make sure that the regional major countries like South Korea and Japan do not get too much closer to the United States. South Korea is also an important economic partner of China, especially in advanced technologies like the semiconductors. So in the upcoming summit, the two countries, South Korea and China, are likely to focus on relatively easy issues that they can reach an agreement or they can agree to work with, such as human exchange, like visa exemptions, the extension of the visa exemptions, or the economic exchange and the cooperation, like the trade arenas between the two countries, and the North Korean issues. And among the issues, those Korean issues would be very important and very useful agenda that both countries can work with, and North Korean issue, which is very important for South Korea, but it's not one of the vital or the core issue for China. So relatively, China feel more comfortable in terms of the making cooperation with South Korea.
Mm-hmm. So let's hope for more concrete results then. Now, let's shift to South Korea-Japan's relations, Professor Connolly. So it's been reported that the Leaders' Summit is also being arranged between the two, with Japan's new Prime Minister, Takaichi, known for her hardline views. What do you see as the key factor in stabilizing relations between Seoul and Tokyo?
Yeah, it's not going to be easy, I think. The new Prime Minister, Takaichi, she is an ultranationalist. She's frequently mentioned revisionist historical views. Her new coalition partners are also right-wing, so we're going to see an even kind of greater swing to the right than we saw even with previous conservative Japanese administrations. And what this will ultimately do is really maybe increase the cost of President Lee maintaining momentum in Japan-Korea relations, trilateral relationships more generally. Now, will the Japanese ultranationalists kind of provoke issues remains to be seen. It is a coalition government, and it's very fragile. It took over a month for the government to even be established. So maybe it's not in their interests to cause many problems with this kind of budding relationship. The second problem, I think, is she's generally in favor of a more assertive and militarized Japanese foreign policy. She has hawkish views on China, especially. This could put some pressure on the Lee administration if, say, Japan and the US team up and pressure Korea to take a position that may anger or aggravate China. So I think President Lee really has his work cut out ahead of him of maintaining momentum with Japan, but not falling prey to these two threats.
A complex one indeed. Now, finally, before we conclude our discussion, so the leaders of the U.S., China, and Japan are all converging at the APEC leaders meeting, and many see this as a major test for the Lee Jae-myung administration. So, Professor Min, what kind of strategy do you think will Korea need to maintain balance among these powers to kind of protect its national interests?
Well, Lee Jae-myung government is pursuing again the national interest-driven pragmatic diplomacy, which is based on the strategic environments that the South Korea is facing. As you know, the ROK-US alliance has been the cornerstone in terms of the strong need of defending South Korean security and the security situation on the Korean Peninsula. And the Lee Jae-myung government is trying to further strengthen the ROK-US alliance and try to develop it into a future-oriented alliance that is more active and reciprocal. And on the other hand, South Korea also needed to make a enhanced cooperation with the United States in advanced technologies and strategic industries such as semiconductors, biotech, and AI. As you know, the U.S. is leading the field and try to reshape the global value chain in advanced technologies, and that fields consist of the core of the South Korea's future economic growth and prosperity. So it is inevitable for South Korea to closely work with the foreign runners of the field like U.S., Japan, and European unions. So it shows that South Korea has got a little bit different strategic situations, unlike compared to in the past. In the past, there was a term Gyeongju, because U.S. for the security and China for economy. But the situation have changed. Of course, still, the South Korea has got the pretty good reliance on the U.S. for the security side, but on the economic side, we got still different situations. So currently we have Gyeongju, which means that still the U.S. for security and the U.S. and the advanced countries, so the world for the economy and technology. And it shows the totally different strategic environments that South Korea face. So based on the robust, relations with the United States, South Korea will manage favorably its relations with China. That is the new normal for South Korea's positions, and that's the overall directions of the Lee Jae-myung government, the foreign policy.
Right, so we'll really have to see how South Korea would navigate this new complex situation moving forward. But thank you so much for your insights, Professor Min.
Thank you.
And we also appreciate your time, Professor Connolly.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame tonight. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.